Yes, Jabir, go for
Assalamualaikum.
it. You can, yes, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yes, well, thank you for conducting this. And I literally signed up hours ago. So it seems to be an awesome program. And Jazakallah khair for your efforts. A question I have in particular is I've got two children. I believe you have few kids as well. So question around kids and developing Salah for them. I've got an 8-year-old daughter and an 11-year-old. He will be turning 11 tomorrow, son. So for my son, it's more straightforward. He joins us in the prayers, alhamdulillah. For the daughter, it's a lot more challenging, and perhaps kids, like, they may have different nature and stuff. So the
Mm.
question in particular is, how can we encourage them? For her, like, she like shows a lot of resistance, and her point is like, Salah takes away from my playtime. She will be like, I don't want to, like, I don't want to achieve anything from Salah, right? So is it a matter of giving them more space? I don't want her to feel forced. So
Yeah,
be open to hearing your suggestions on this.
yeah, absolutely. 1 second. Yeah. Okay, no, brilliant question. And look, it's obviously the session has sort of gone on in terms of time. This is the last thing we'll talk about for today. But I think that and so I'll just be able to say a very kind of high level summary at this stage. But what I'll point you towards is the fact, I don't know if you've already seen it or not, but in the portal, in the kind of online portal, which you all have access to, when you log in, there is a kind of thing, a free resources section. And in there is a link to, or a download of the of a guide put together called How to Get Your Kids to Pray. Okay, so it's literally all there, how to get your kids to pray. And there's a number of points which I mentioned, and then different points were relevant for different parents and children, at different times as well. So it's kind of a big topic. The main things that come to mind with a child that is still young and is uncomfortable. Yeah, and thanks for pasting the link in the chat. That is uncomfortable, that is kind of resisting the Salah. Yeah, definitely at that kind of age, I would say you want to be, you need to go relatively easy, right? And but what you might want to do is try to say, for example, okay, fine, let's go for one a day, for example. If it's like 8-year-old, 9-year-old, whatever, okay, fine, let's go for one a day. Okay, especially if they're resisting. So that's in terms of specifics around the prayer, right? Just one a day. So they give them a target, right? Well, it feels like, okay, that's something to just get started with. More broadly, like, there's a point I make, which is, sorry, excuse me. The point I make, which is first Allah, then Salah. Okay, first Allah, then Salah. Sometimes, obviously I don't know your circumstances, right? But many of us, we don't talk to our children enough, or relate to our children enough. Sorry, my throat is really going. 1 second. All right, I'll try and survive the last couple of minutes. Sorry. So, yes, we don't talk to them enough or relate to them enough about Allah, like in relation to the day-to-day of life. So if we're not making any, like, how are we building their connection with their Lord? How are we getting them to appreciate who he is? How are we getting them to see who they are relative to him? How are we getting them to kind of relate to him in the context of their play, right? Of their toys, right? You mentioned, right? Because he's taken away from my playtime, etc. Yeah, of their food, their education, blah, 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 whatever. And I think that's important that we do that in as natural a way as possible. Not in a kind of way where this is your religious or your Islamic studies almost kind of thing, but just in day-to-day conversation. Bring Allah into the conversation, right? So that's very, very important. Very important for us to be doing that, connecting them with Allah more broadly, and then framing the Salah in the context of that connection with Allah. It's not, oh, come on, let's all do our Salah. It's, come, let's all talk to Allah. Big difference. I think for a child, there's a big difference. And frankly, even for an adult, right? It's a big difference between them hearing, let's do Salah, versus let's talk to Allah, right? There's a big difference in that, how they process that. But definitely, look, I'll just mention these 2 points for now, because partly because I might not survive talking much longer, but also because the detailed thing is there available in the portal, and you can see what works for your situation. There's many different points which I mentioned there. But definitely, I think going easy. I think if we're overly tough on our kids, like the problem is, especially nowadays, I mean, kids seem to mature faster, right? Like as you go through time. And we don't want them to build a resentment. We don't want them to feel forced, like you said, because in the end, they're going to become independent, right? Adults, and they will make their decisions. The more independence we can give them, right, with some consequences and managing those very carefully in terms of reward as well as punishment, if you like, but managing it very carefully. So give some sense of consequence, but in a kind of very managed way and a wise way. I think, that's the key. But to really leave it to them, let them make decisions. Okay, make your decision. I mean, with my kids, oldest is 9, soon will be 10, youngest is 1. Like, as much as possible, I just let them decide on things. Even when if they refuse to do something that I really want them to do or they need to do, whatever it is, whether it's something in terms of, like an act of faith or act of worship, or whether it's to do with their learning or just generally speaking, whatever it is, right? Like I try and give them as much independent choice as possible. Let them choose, let them decide. Because then I found overall that their proactivity eventually to do the things that they need to do, like becomes, it becomes greater because they're working with their own conscience. They're developing that sense of being able to work with their own conscience, apply their conscience, right? And leaving them with that challenge. Sometimes we as parents, we don't realize that we make it harder for them in a way that's easier for us actually by letting them sit with a problem, with a dilemma, right? Rather than like forcing down this track or that track or making the points all for them. But you just leave it with them and it just plays in the back of their head, back of their mind, right? They contend with it and their own consciences sometimes, even if it doesn't look like it, but I think it's definitely going on. Anyway, that's all for now.